Alright, epilogue. Let's see what happens here. They have fled. It's always interesting when they flee the camp, but now it's completely different rules. Oh, we had been traveling for at least a couple of hours, so thinking of heading back to the camp was pointless. Well, at least until the evening when the heat will decrease a bit. And we still haven't seen a single car, Rooter points out, rubs it in our face. That Rooter dick. Turned around and looked at Rooter. Well, no, you can interpret that in many ways. It doesn't have to be dickish, it's just hopelessness. There we go. Hopelessness, probably. He pulled off his shirt and began to wring the sweat out of it. Oh man, that's rough. Lisa was trying to revive Lena. If that's Sunstroke, I said. Stop, said Alisa. She shouted at me. Huh? That is indeed Sunstroke. We've gotten ourselves into deep trouble. She won't make it anywhere. Maybe I haven't had Sunstroke. Like I got knocked out. Well, maybe. I mean, if they got to stay there for hours, don't have any water, then yeah. There's kind of deep trouble, I guess. I had water, and I just stayed in the shade for a couple of hours. I couldn't make it anywhere. I was just stuck. Playing cards for hours and hours. I walked towards the road, shielded my eyes from the sun with my hand, and stared into the distance. What are you playing now? Says, oh, good thing I gotta change that. I always forget to change that in the Twitch UI. It's it's called Everlasting Summer. It's a visual novel. Summer. It's a very weird. It's a bit chaotic. So let's say our main protagonist here, it's zombie horror, says Colgating on tap. Yeah, at this moment, I think it's zombie horror. We have only seen the one zombie, and it wasn't chasing us. So, but most of the story is like, think about it like it's similar to Twilight, but for teenage boys instead of teenage girls. They're going to a summer camp, and then it's a pick and choose between different girls that the main protagonist ends up with. But now it's a zombie horror, and otherwise it's a time travel mystery also. So it's a very strange, chaotic. They weren't really sure what they wanted to do with the story, I think, so they just did everything. Celestial Serenity says the art is nice in the landscape. Yeah, I do like the art. Most of it, some of it, it's just, it makes me feel queasy and cringe. But most of the art is beautiful, I think. And it's very anime inspired, where all the women has like 3 sizes too big chests. I wonder why it is like that. Music is good too, says Colgating on tap. Yeah, indeed. I wonder why it is like that in anime, in this as well, like those huge breasts. For me, that's like way too big. I don't enjoy that at all. Like for me, the perfect size, like in my taste, it should fit in your hand. Celestial Serenity asks, can you sing? No, I cannot. Well, I guess I can, but it wouldn't be ASMR. It would be a horrible experience for everybody involved. Me most of all. Yeah. Yeah. Oof. Don't like it. I walked towards the road, shielded my eyes from the sun with my hand and stared into the distance. Nothing but the same asphalt thread leading beyond the horizon, with no sounds of civilization. What about rap? Asks Celestial Serenity. Lol, no. I'm too slow for that. Too slow. Rapping is being fast, right? Like, well, to be fair, I probably could get better at rapping. Like, if we look at it like talking fast, but no, maybe not. It's the same as with singing. You would need to. Oh. Then again, I mean, it's not in my aptitude, and I don't really have any interest in it either. I can read. I like reading. Or any signs of human presence at all. It was like we were the only people left, not only in the camp, but in the whole world. Though, if you think about what has happened before, it's really not a big surprise. Oh my god. Yeah, he's behaving more and more unlike Semyon here. Like, what is not a big surprise? That no one is here? I mean, everything is a big surprise. Like, there are no rules to this world. He cannot foresee, like, anything that will happen next. Everything has been a big... Well, I guess that if everything is a big surprise, then it's no big surprise that things didn't turn out in their favor. I guess you could interpret it like that. I went back to the others and sat down on the log. And then I said, I guess we have to scout ahead. Why though? He has obviously never played Dungeons and Dragons. Never split the party. Never split the party. It's a mistake. I looked at Router to check what's ahead and maybe if we could find something. Well, this is not Dungeons and Dragons. This is real life. Maybe, yeah, trying to find something. Like, how could have they been walking for hours without finding like a farm or a house of any kind or a people of any kind? No signs of civilization for hours? How does that happen? That's super rare. Why would you put a camp, pioneer camp, out in the middle of nowhere? That's very strange. That's another book that I need to read that I've never read. Paradise Lost. This Banana Waffle Monkey, he's never read it. So I didn't understand the reference. But, says Elisa. Oh, did they split the party in Paradise Lost? She can't go anywhere right now anyway. Lena was lying with her eyes closed and gasping for air. I think that words mean something else in my mind than in his mind. If someone were gasping for air, I would be panicking. Colgate in on top says, makes sense to put pioneers camps far away from temptations. Yeah, they're like far away from all the temptations. I don't know. Like, we can't get close to any temptations in a pioneer camp. That makes a lot of sense, Colgate in on tap. I see exactly what you're talking about. Banana Waffle Monkey says, Satan splits Adam and Eve to make it easier to manipulate them. Yeah. Well, I mean, it depends on what you're trying to do with manipulation. Sometimes it's easier to put them in a group. Well, you know, the Ash conformity experiment. We've talked about that before. For those who doesn't know, the Ash conformity experiment is where you put someone in a room. Well, you put 5 or 6 people in a room, spread them out, and then you take like a whiteboard or whatever. Yeah, we did talk about that, didn't we, Banana Wolf Monkey? And then you draw 3 lines on a board, like a whiteboard or a blackboard, it doesn't matter. 3 lines where there are 3 obviously different lengths. Like the middle one or whatever, it doesn't matter. One of them is longer than the other or shorter than the others, it doesn't matter, but they are. Then you ask the first person and you say, are these lines the same length? And the first person said, yes, they are the same length. And you ask the second person, and the second person says, yes, they are the same. And the third says, yes, they are the same. And all to the way to the last person, who is the actual experiment subject, like all the others are actors just lying about it. And more often than not, the last person will say that, yes, the lines are the same length. So sometimes it's easier to manipulate people in groups. If you can manage to manipulate a group, which could be easier. But also, like, it's at the same time, it depends on context. I haven't read Paradise Lost, but splitting up Adam and Eve to make them easier to manipulate makes sense as well, I guess, since thinking critically is best done in groups as well, because it's very difficult to see through your own biases. We're terrible at that, we human beings. That is, like Celestial Serenity was asking before, one of the reasons why I started streaming, because I want to present my worldviews and hopefully have people see through my biases and help me develop my philosophy and worldviews to make them better, because they become better in groups. All lines are infinitely lengthy, says the math nerd, Colgate in on tap. Yes, I meant the layman use of the word line, and so I did mean line segments. Thank you, Colgate in on tap. Line segments. We weren't mathematicians, by the way. So she was gasping for air. Masha said, "Okay, go ahead." She said calmly, even. It just occurred to me that I had planned to have a talk with her. Yes, indeed, she claims that she's acting strangely. We haven't seen it yet, but it's definitely not time for that now. Let's go, I said to Rooter. He shrugged his shoulders and followed me. So the men go out and explore, and the female stays around and take care of the injured. Is that a word? No, the incapacitated one. Right. That's like how life is supposed to be. I don't know if I would want a Rooter with me. I would. Well, I mean, I don't know about the personalities right now. I would. In his place, I would rather have Masha with me. Like, since he was planning to talk to her, since that's the only person that he actually knows at the moment, even though she is acting strange. Like, yeah, I would bring Masha. Like, what's familiar brings safety, right? I wouldn't trust the others because they're acting super strangely. Yeah, exactly. Colgate on top says Masha is the only one he can trust. And he doesn't even do that. It might be his paranoia, or it might be he has, like, dealing with those trust issues is one of his priorities, right? He said so himself, so bringing Masha would make more sense. We kept walking for about 15 minutes. The girls were left far behind. Rooter said, "What do you think? Any chance of us meeting somebody?" he asked quietly. "I don't know," I said, in an annoyed tone. And I really wanted to refrain from talking now. Oh, why is that? The endless fields stretched to the horizon, sparsely sprinkled with patches of trees and hills. The landscape looked so typical and tranquil that, in fact, caused anxiety. We found ourselves in the plains of hell. At least we would expect to be attacked from just anywhere. So we could brace ourselves and prepare for the worst. Now we just felt like little droplets of paint on the canvas of a nameless painter who paints the summer in central Russia. Or wherever we are now. Well, this only made our fear stronger. Look, said yelled out Router. He yelled out. I narrowed my eyes and saw that the road took a turn. So, what's so special? There must be something there, says Router. What makes you think that? Says I asked. Well, since there's a turn, we've been walking straight forward all the time, and now... Okay, let's go and take a look. Oh, wow. In a few minutes, we finally came to the gates of Sovionok Pioneer Camp. Yeah, that's one way to make a line infinite. Make it into a circle. I collapsed down on the curb and buried my face in my hands. I didn't feel scared. In fact, I didn't feel any emotions at all, just a fatigue and a void inside of me. Isn't that how hopelessness feels? Fatigue and void inside? But how? Asked Router. He mumbled. I have no idea. Besides, what's the difference anyway? Not like there's any stranger than anything else that happened to me in the last few days. I looked up at him, feeling exhausted. Router's lips were trembling. An expression of deathly horror were plastered on his face. I said, let's go back and fetch the girl. I didn't wait for him and just shuffled off back to where we left him. Found anything? Asked Masha, chewing on some strawberries of uncertain origin. Nice strawberries. We did. A camp. What camp? She looked surprised. Our camp. What? Masha looked so silly now, I couldn't help but flashing an ironic smile. But you were going forward, not backward, she said. Forward, and Sovionok is there, I answered. Hey, stop joking, she exclaimed. I'm dead serious. But, said Alisa quietly, she was sitting down on the grass, cradling the head of Lena, who was still sleeping. Yeah, just like that, I said tiredly and dropped down to the ground. Okay, it means that we're heading there, says Masha. I looked at Masha keenly and suddenly realized that I can't wait anymore. Hey, what's happening with you? What do you mean? She looked. Her look screamed that now isn't the time for breezy chatter. You were scared to death yesterday, yet today you have this happens to me all the time attitude. But what's the point in panicking, says Masha. She cracked a barely visible smile. If I didn't know you, I went quiet, bit my lip and turned away. But really, do I know her that well? Sure, we spent so many years together, but... Colgate in on tap says, one does not simply leave Sovionok. Like, how can you spend so many years together and not know her? If you get down to it, I always thought more about myself. Oh, he is like Semyon. He is like Semyon, look at that. Or rather, I always believed that she was completely satisfied. And she was always the same to me. The same at just about anything. Even when we were breaking up, as if she wasn't a real person, just my favorite article of clothing. Holy shit. I've gotta agree with you now, Semyon. He seems worse than Semyon now. I'm pretty sure you called him worse than Semyon yesterday, and I agree, like, holy shit. Thinking about it, I have no idea what's going on in her soul. I just never cared about it. Thus, her behaving like this under the circumstances doesn't seem more bizarre than anything else that's happening to us. And if you think about that talk at the beach 2 evenings ago, she probably really is stronger than me. Hey, are you listening to me at all? Oh man, she answered, and he just went off and ignored her. Nice. Oh, sorry, I got carried away. So much has happened. She looked at me sternly. Let's get going to the camp, or wherever you were, if it is the same old camp. All right, I said. In fact, it's not like we had any other choice. A few more hours in the scorching heat would only yield more casualties. But we have to carry her along, said Masha. Yes, just a second, let me figure it out. I found 2 fairly long and sturdy sticks in the nearby grove. Nice. Coming back, I ordered the rooter to take his shirt off. He tried to object, but soon enough realized that there was no use in arguing. I took off my shirt as well, and we made a sort of a stretcher, attaching the fabric to the poles. Good job. Will it hold? Asked Masha, and gave our device a questioning look. But ultimately gave it a few strong pulls, ensuring its strength, and smiled. Yeah, that would work, no problem. It will, at least until we reach the camp. Lest the sticks, the logs, no, what are they called? What did he call them? Never mind. They snap. That's gonna be annoying, but... It was hard to go in this heat, but it was even harder to carry the injured. Oh, he calls her injured. That is Lena. Several times I almost fainted and barely caught myself halfway to the ground. Ruther felt even worse. Both Masha and Elisa were swapping places with him every now and then. Still, my pride won't allow me to ask them to carry Lena even for a minute. Yeah, what a dick. Sure, it's silly to act like this under these circumstances, but I couldn't help myself. This is yet another flaw in my personality. Along with coldness, inattentiveness to others, even my loved ones, and other less than noble traits. Yeah, like the whole story that he's written all makes sense. It comes from that type of mind. Like, that is what I have been complaining about as well a lot lately, that type of mind is who has written this. Finally, we somehow made it to the camp gates. I collapsed in the grass in the shadow of the unknown pioneer statue. Completely worn out. Masha said, "It actually is our camp." Masha lingered on the woods. And indeed, it looks the same. Elisa said, "We have to carry her into a cabin." She mentioned it quietly. Yeah, and I got up with considerable effort and prepared for the last run. The obvious choice was Olga's cabin. Is it the closest one? I don't remember the map, but I would assume if it's the obvious choice, because the obvious choice would be the closest one, right? Most likely because we managed to come through the last night here without major problems. At least we're still alive. Me and Ruther were sprawled, exhausted on one bed, and the girls were undressing Lena on the other. "Don't look," says Masha sternly. "Not like they're anything worth looking at," I said. Oof. Colgate in on tap says that Semyon is kind of not Semyon's self-insertion to a movie as a screenwriter. Well, I mean, a lot of writers write about themselves, right? And their own lives. They just make it like metaphors. That's not unusual, I think. And he would write like a story about all the women just throwing themselves at him for no reason. It's not like there's anything worse to look at. I snorted and turned away, giving Ruther a harsh poke in the ribs, making him follow my lead. "We're gonna get some water and probably rummage through the canteen too," says Masha. Not unusual, but it explains their similarity. Yes, indeed. "It's dangerous to go alone. Here, Take this. No? Wanna come along? Asked Masha. She grinned. No thanks. There we go. At least take that pipe with you, I said uncertainly. Do you really think it will help? What kind of face is that? I feel like the drawings are off on Masha. It doesn't seem like the drawings doesn't fit what she's saying a lot of the times. I sighed heavily and closed my eyes. Well, be careful then, I said. The door closed after a second. You asleep? Ruta's whispers reached me, as if one could sleep here, I said. All at once I heard Lena moan from the other bed. I sat up on my elbows and looked at her. She was tossing and turning under the blanket. Suddenly she opened her eyes abruptly and turned to face me. Devil grin was frozen on her face. The same one I saw yesterday evening. Hot enough for ya, eh? She burst into laughter. I felt a shiver run down my spine. My ability to speak vanished. You... What? Said Ruther through his sleep. I turned to him sharply. Look! Wait, you turned your back around her when she's acting that weird? Waved my hands, pointing at Lena's bed. What? He got up and looked where I was pointing at first and back at me. I turned around and just saw Lena sleeping peacefully. Didn't you hear it? What? Here Lena was awake, and she said, Oh, it seems like you've got sunstroke too, says Ruther. He turned towards the wall. But I'm absolutely sure that I heard and saw it. Well, it could be true that the heat got to me at last. But it all seems to be exactly like that time, and it wasn't Lena. At the very least, it's not the Lena that I knew, as if she's possessed by the devil. I lay down and pulled my blanket over my head. I really wanted to sleep, but the realization that I might never wake up again if I fall asleep now was keeping me up and running. I can imagine. I'm not sure how long I spent lying like that, trembling at every rustle, but eventually the door burst open. The steps resounded in the room. I barely peered out from under the blanket and caught a glimpse of Elise and Masha entering with a bucket of water and some bags. I see, you went a bit cuckoo here, says Masha. Yeah, sorta. Wait, what? Oh, hiding under the blanket, right. I replied with a trembling voice, trying to flash a smile. Everything okay? Seems like it. I glanced at Lena yet again, but she was still sleeping quietly. Maybe it was indeed just my imagination. Sure, given the condition of such extreme emotional stress and physical fatigue, I might be seeing things. Indeed, you might. I got up with considerable effort, took a cup from the table and scooped up some water. So, what are we going to do next? We'll have to stay here for now, said Masha. But Olga has called the police, said Alisa, like a dumbass. Yeah, but everyone disappeared after that, and also where would they come from? From this circle that only goes around and back to the camp? In any case, until Lena comes to her senses, although if I never happen to see her like that again, I would frankly rather that she doesn't wake up. Oh, if he sees her like that again, he would prefer her not waking up at all. Ooh, Alisa lay down on Lena's bed and Masha sat down next to me. Get some sleep, said Masha. He gently stroked the top of my head. Can you really sleep with all this happening? We'll keep guard. You look really tired, she said. I guess she was right. Okay, but just a nap. Wake me up before evening. She didn't say a word, just smiled instead. Promise. I promise, replied Masha quietly. I closed my eyes and instantly tumbled into a dream. what dream is this? What dream is this? Here they come again, the grasshoppers. Oh, he's being chased again. This time it's their king, a huge swamp green monstrosity with really long curved legs, wings that would match the wingspan of a large airliner, and an enormous pitch black eyes. He was hanging over me, grinning and spluttering something really loud. I still didn't understand anything of their language, but judging by the tone, it wasn't anything nice that you would hear on the morning news. Wait. Do you hear nice things in the morning news? I don't remember hearing nice things in the morning news. I wanted to get away, but he clutched me tightly with his wretched claw. I could hear my bones cracking, feel my ribs breaking, piercing my internal organs with their sharp splinters. I felt hundreds of hammers smashing inside my skull. My vision faded, and then the next moment, fountains of blood and flesh were spraying all over the place. That is a rough dream. I jumped up in a cold sweat. My own scream still reverberated in the room. It took me several seconds to clear the dimness from my eyes. I looked around frantically and realized that it was evening already and completely dark outside. Good grief, we didn't turn off the light yesterday. Masha was lying asleep next to me while Rooter was curled up on the floor. Lena was lying on the other bed, tightly wrapped in the blanket. Yet Alisa was nowhere to be seen. Hey, I woke Masha up with a few rough prods. What? She slowly came to her senses. Didn't I ask you? Sorry, I fell asleep. She had such a guilty expression on her face that I felt sick. I shouldn't have relied on her. At least I could have set up an alarm. Yeah, indeed. I woke Rooter up. Where's Alisa? I asked. I don't know, said Masha worriedly. Well, who does know? We were all asleep. Well, she was sleeping here, and then... Her eyes darted around guiltily. And then you fell asleep. That's exactly what he did last night. Like, oh, I'm keeping watch. Right now. She hung her head and let out a heavy sigh. Oh, perfect. Just perfect. Such an asshole. I pounded my fist on the table, making Masha jump. Okay, you sit here and we'll go find her. Alone? Her face suddenly took an expression of fright. Alone? Wasn't it you who told me that it's not worth panicking? Yeah, but it's not. Oh, fine, I'll go alone. But... Or do you really want to sit here with only Lena? Masha kept silent. It's dangerous to go alone, says Rooter. Here, take this. I noticed that Rooter seemed to have fully awakened. And it's not dangerous for her to sit here all alone. I felt that there was no point in arguing, so I got up, grabbed my trusty pipe, and headed for the door. In any case, given that people have been disappearing into thin air, one can't feel safe anywhere or in any company. Of course, it still could turn out that Alisa just went somewhere. To the toilet, for example. Indeed. Although, given how frightened she looked, I guess she would have woken up Masha. Or just held it till morning. Yeah. Would not have gone alone. Being that scared, I would wake someone up. Bring someone with me. Damn, anything but going all alone through this camp, exactly. I braced myself, pulled the handle, and went outside. I swept my eyes across the landscape, and then I saw Alisa. hanging high above the ground from the tree, right in front of the cabin. A sharp pain pierced my temples and I collapsed to the ground. Oh? Oh. I thought someone hit him in the temple, but no. The horror was so overwhelming that I literally felt my whole body being bound in steel chains. Blinded with fear. Man, blinded by fear. Great song. Great song. If you haven't heard it, I can recommend it. The Gates, Blinded by Fear. I barely managed to crawl back into the cabin and close the door. What happened? Asked Masha and rushed over to me. Don't look. I grasped her arm. Don't go outside. What's the matter? She reached out for the door handle and I attempted to stop her, but I was so weak I could only let out a groan of despair. Opening the door, Masha screamed and froze in her tracks. Gathering my last ounces of strength, I got up and kicked the door shut. The next moment, Masha fainted and fell back into my arms. I carried her to the bed and put her down next to the shaking Rooter. His face told me that he is definitely not interested in knowing what happened there. All those screams woke Lena up. She rose slightly in her bed and gave us a glance. What's happening? She asked in a whisper. I didn't know how I should reply. I felt a scream rising up in my throat, but I managed to muffle it to a hollow sigh. Lena was horrified, but she still didn't realize exactly what had happened here. Don't go outside, I moaned. Unlike Masha, she wasn't one to argue. An oppressive silence ensued. Even the grasshopper seemed to quiet down in order to add suspense to the situation. Masha was still lying on my lap. Rooter was quivering in the corner of the bed, and Lena was sitting in front of me with an expression of doom and despair on her face. I stared at the door with an unblinking gaze, waiting for the moment it will burst open and... My fear couldn't manifest in any concrete form. A homicidal maniac, a monster, an alien, a frog. A gay frog. No, I'm kidding. It doesn't say that. It was a horror of the unknowable darkness and emptiness. I wasn't afraid that I would be torn to pieces just like Slavia, or I would become a zombie like Juliana. I was afraid to disappear, to vanish without a trace from this world. Oh, he's the complete opposite from me. I'm the complete opposite. I'm not afraid of vanishing without a trace from this world. That doesn't really scare me. I mean, I don't want to, but I'm more afraid of being ripped apart. Like being ripped apart seems like a terrible way to die. Oh, give me a fast, painless death. And sudden, so I don't see it coming. Like it just happens. Like maybe I just fall asleep and then never wake up. I wouldn't see that coming, right? Masha let out a quiet moan. I just had such a nightmare, she said. It wasn't a dream. She opened her eyes and looked at me with horror. Then, there. Don't look, I shouted and hastily embraced her. Lena started crying loudly, ran up and pressed herself against me, trembling all over. Long minutes dragged on in agonizing silence. So, what are we gonna do now? Says Masha. Ooh. Scratch my nose, that's what we're gonna do now. She asked through her tears. She didn't seem so self-confident now. Yeah. Although we were all in the same situation, time passed, yet nothing happened. We had to make a decision. I couldn't say that I came back to my senses after what I saw, but I still felt my mind clearing up a bit. I knew one thing for certain. We cannot stay here. And it wasn't because it was more dangerous here than anywhere else. It's just because I can't endure staying near the corpse of Elisa. I bet it's even more of a gut-wrenching experience for the girls. We have to go, I said quietly. Felt Masha and Lena hugging me even tighter. We have to. Ruther stopped shaking and left his bed. How are you feeling? I asked Lena. She said nothing. Can you walk? Probably. I gently escaped her embrace and got up. We have to run. At night it will be easier to go. But we... Masha tried to make a humble objection. Yeah, I know we decided to stay, but now we have to get out of here. I turned to Ruther. Do you realize that they shouldn't see all that? He gave a barely visible nod. Although Ruther didn't know what happened to Elisa, it was obvious that his vivid imagination had conjured up so many gruesome theories during the time that he was probably even more depressed than me. Yeah, I was thinking that. Isn't it better to know? I think we've had that discussion before as well. I don't remember what our conclusion was, but isn't it always better to know? Well, we decided it was like similar to ignorance is bliss, that discussion. We decided it was subjective, right? For me, it's always better to know, and it seems like for Ruther in this situation, it would be better to know, to look. And it seemed like it was probably better for Masha as well, since she had the compulsion to look. Well, Lena seems to be, well, Lena's just strange, but she might be that kind of person where it's better not to look. Okay, we're gonna hold hands and go. I'll go first and lead the way. Masha goes next, then Lena, then you. I looked at the girls. They were sitting with their heads hanging down, sobbing quietly. Ready? Nobody replied. This was obviously a useless question. One can never be ready for such a situation. I took Masha's hand, turned around, and gave Lena and Ruther a serious look. Okay, now shut your eyes and don't open them no matter what. Got that? Yeah. Lena nodded. I steeled myself and burst open the door and went out holding Masha's hand. Watch out for the steps. When we made our way outside, I darted a final glance at Elisa. What I saw now didn't send me sprawling on the ground, although my heart was racing frantically. I was feeling sick and dizzy, my stomach turned. She was hanging about 5 meters above the ground, several neckerchiefs tied together in a string that were tightened around her throat. Bulging eyes, protruding tongue, putrefaction already at work on the body. It looked like she didn't die a couple of hours ago, but at least a couple of days ago. An expression of agony and inhuman suffering was permanently frozen on her face. It was clear that she couldn't have done such a thing to herself. My God, who came up with all of this? Maybe we are in hell. Well, that's a hypothesis. He's been saying it a couple of times, but I've never had that hypothesis that he's actually in hell. I hastened my steps away from the diabolical scene, dragging the others along. I ordered them to open their eyes only when we reached the square. She's still there? Asked Masha, not letting go of my hand. I just nodded. Who? Elisa? Asked Lena, cried out and burst into tears. Masha embraced her and tried to comfort her. What happened to her? Asked Rooter, muttered Rooter with a faltering tongue. I bet you don't want to know that. For a while, I just stood there and looked at the moon. Then I was sobbing, Rooter was pacing circles around us, and Masha sat down on the bench and buried her face in her hand. Okay, it's time, I said quietly, yet nobody moved. We can't stay here. I walked to Masha, leaned over and took her hand. She raised her eyes, filled with tears at me, and nodded. We slowly proceeded to the bus stop. Night has fallen on the camp. Along the way, I noticed that the grasshoppers were almost quiet, keeping silent for some time. Now they resumed their nasty song, but this time it was much quieter, and I might say a little bit more respectful. Their daytime progressive noise changed to a nocturne for violin and orchestra. Is there any chance they're conscious about what's going on here? Of course, if we assume that there are grasshoppers in hell too. We came to the bus stop and stopped, hesitating. So, where are we going? Asked Masha, wiping her tears. Okay, we already tried going to the right. Let's go to the left. Oof. There's no town there. Just a couple of days ago, there was no camp to the right, I said. Maybe we shouldn't, Lena sobbed quietly. We have no choice. I won't stay here any longer. Yeah, that's a good spot to save, it seems. Time for some lunch and probably try to... Look at that. 3 different faces, but her arm is always in that. Always like that. It's weird. Alright, time for lunch. Peace, says Banana Waffle Monkey, and I say cheers for hanging out. It's been fun as usual. Yeah, and see you tomorrow perhaps.